We are back. It's the Joe Holka Show presented by PrizePicks. We're talking key matchups to exploit in the championship round. We're going to build a DraftKings lineup at the end for this two-game slate AFC NFC Championship game, but only after we go game by game. Kansas City Chiefs, Baltimore Ravens. Let's start there because that is game number one on this slate. It is a 3.5-point spread in favor of the Ravens, so basically a pick 'em with that home field advantage. I guess what were your first instincts telling you when you saw that we'd get Chiefs-Ravens in the AFC Championship game?
Yeah, I mean, the Chiefs just keep finding a way to get there, right? Like everything still has to run through the Chiefs
Yep.
if you want to get out of the AFC, and I feel like that's fitting, right? Like, it would be. I don't say it would be a bummer, right? Like if like Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson got to a Super Bowl and won one, but like you got to go through the Chiefs. There's something extra if they get that. Like if Lamar were to win and Lamar and the Ravens were to win this Super Bowl and beat the Chiefs in the process, it would add something to it.
Totally.
But the Chiefs, I think in general, like when I look at this matchup overall, like the two things that stand out: one, we've got arguably the two best defenses in the NFL playing in this game. And then two, like the Chiefs have had this like playoff resurgence, but they've also faced two of the most injured teams like in the NFL playoffs the past 2 weeks. And this is a team by and large for the entirety of the season, like really struggled offensively, at least in context of like previous iterations of the Chiefs. And they're not facing a super banged up Baltimore defense, one that has been, like I said, arguably the best defense in the NFL the entire season. Are they going to be able to kind of carry over what they did, like in terms of offensive effectiveness the past two games against this Ravens team? I think that definitely stands out as like a question mark coming to this game on the road in Baltimore.
I'm with you, man. I don't know exactly what to do with this one. And in some ways, it's easier, right? Because we've been talking about some of these matchups for weeks. We kind of know that KC likes to shut down number one wide receivers, and there's like all those dynamics, right? But still, like, we have to give the trump card to the quarterbacks at some point, right? That's one of the things that I'm always thinking through in these type of matchups. And who's gonna have the ball last on this one? But also, it could just be a lower scoring game in general than maybe what might meet the eye at the beginning. So I guess on the Chiefs side of the ball, we can start there. What were your thoughts, I guess, on seeing Kelsey's resurgence over the last couple weeks? He looks a little bit better. Maybe he's been saving it for the playoffs. I don't know. And then Rashid Rice, kind of a quiet divisional round as well. So curious about both those guys in particular, since obviously most of the offense is flowing through those two.
Yeah, Kelsey. I mean, we were on Kelsey last week. We built a lineup where I said we got to force Kelsey.
Got both of them. Yeah.
we had to do it. And, because you look at the last two games, I mean, you look at the Miami Dolphins in the wild card round. We're missing, Jerome Baker and Andrew Van Ginkel. They really took advantage of David Long in the passing game. Kelsey didn't absolutely smash in that game, but he still had 29% of the team targets. And then he comes back the next week against a Bills team that's kind of depleted. They're missing Terrell Bernard. Dotson's banged up. They're down to like AJ Klein at a point in that game. And the Chiefs knew this too. Like the Chiefs ran the most 12 and 13 personnel they ran in a game all season last week. They wanted to keep the limited amount of linebackers that the Bills had available on the field in that game. And if the Bills didn't slow that game down, because each team only had like 8 official offensive possessions, I mean, Kelsey would have went over 100 yards in that game for sure.
Yep.
This possessions were limited, but he's at his 2 highest target rates now in the postseason that he's had since week 8. Now we're getting, though, this Baltimore defense that is not depleted at the linebacker position. In fact, they have good linebackers, in Roquan Smith and, Patrick Queen. And although Kelsey has kind of bounced back from a target share perspective, he still hasn't cleared 75 yards in any of his past 5 games played. His last 100-yard game came back in week 7. And Baltimore as a whole have been pretty good against tight ends. They have, allowed some big games to guys like Trey McBride and George Kittle along the way, but those are the only 2 tight ends that clear 60 yards in a game against them this season. So I do think that Kelsey, and in particular, if Kelsey doesn't get going, then this passing game from a top-down perspective does struggle a little bit, and it has this season. And I think that could be a case here, facing a healthier version of Baltimore on the road. And Rashid Rice, I've been waiting to see some initial kind of practice reports on Rashid Rice, because he definitely appeared to be limited towards the end of that game. He's a guy that's been dealing with hamstring injuries and a knee injury as well, just to see if he's kind of banged up. And the Ravens are another team. They've been really good against opposing wide receiver ones. I mean, they're 14th in the NFL in points per game, allowed to those guys. They are allowing a league low 6.1 yards per target to opposing slot receivers and 6.6 yards per target to opposing outside boundary receivers. And we've seen Rashee Rice, he's a guy that plays inside and out. 50.9% of his snaps on the outside, 46.8% of his snaps in the slot. They move him around a couple areas for the discrepancy there too as well. But that's just kind of the question mark I have with this Chiefs passing game overall, is just they're facing a healthy and good defense. And we've seen this Chiefs offense struggle against good defenses over the course of the season.
Yeah, I'm with you. This is one that I was like struggling the most with on the way too early. PropDrop ended up on the initial drop, just taking a Lamar over on rushing, took an under on Zay Flowers 48.5, which has moved in our favor a little bit. And then I kind of avoided this game for a full day because I wanted to try and dig a little bit deeper into it. And then the drop that went out yesterday, mostly just this game, ended up taking a Rice over. I don't know how I feel about it yet. 58.5 just felt really low for what this guy's been doing over his last 8 games, 9 targets per game, 86.9 yards. There's some arguments there. I believe you wrote up against this type of coverage. He gets a little bit more volume than typically. So there's some signal here for Rice, and that line just feels too low for me. And then took a Gus Edwards over on touchdowns just after he hasn't scored in a couple games, and Lamar gets in the box a couple times. I think there was some overreaction there. But this game to me is a little bit tougher to navigate, and just try and tell yourself stories that there's going to be a lot of points. The only thing I haven't touched on yet is the Pacheco stuff. PrizePicks kind of teased us a little bit. They have an alt line out there just for a half a receiving yard, which I grabbed on like one of these entries, just as he hasn't been as active in the passing game as we expected over the last little while with McKinnon out. But any thoughts on Pacheco in this spot?
I mean, we know the volume is going to be there for Pacheco, and he's had touchdown equity. He's found the end zone in 6 straight games. He's now played 5 full games without Jerick McKinnon, and in those games, he has 107 of 124 backfield touches. It's 86% of the backfield touches in those games. So we know it's going to be, as long as the Chiefs can hang around, the volume's going to be there. I mean, this offense really is just concentrated on those 3 guys, the 2 pass catchers we mentioned, Rashee Rice, Travis Kelce, and Pacheco. Like, this is like what this offense is down to, and you've got kind of some ancillary guys that get some targets along the way. This Ravens defense has been kind of up and down. What's going to be interesting in this matchup is like I highlighted earlier when we talked about the Chiefs knew what the Bills had into that game, like at a linebacker, like what they didn't have actually. And they ran so much 12 and 13 personnel. And as a byproduct, 47% of Pacheco's runs came against 8 or more defenders in the box. That's his highest rate in a game since week 5. And it's gonna be interesting to see what they're able to do in this game, because they you want to spread the Ravens out. You want them you want to be able to run from kind of light boxes against when the Ravens have to defend the run in lighter boxes, 6 or fewer defenders. They're 20th in yards per carry allowed to running backs. When they're able to kind of load the box against runs, they're 9th in yards per carry. They're 10th in success rate against those runs, and that's removing red zone runs, because you see a lot of those heavy box runs kind of get manipulated by kind of the just down and distance. So if the Ravens or the Chiefs just want to line up and play 12 personnel, 13 personnel, that's going to invite the best run defense that the Ravens can put on the field, as opposed to kind of spreading them out where teams have had more success against the run. Like when you look at some of the running backs that have had really successful games against the Ravens, of late, like Kyron Williams, like a guy that runs out of 11 personnel almost strictly. Devin Achane had 100 yards against them. Some of it was like some junk game script. But yeah, those are kind of like the guys that have big games recently against them, kind of removing the Najee Harris week 18 game that kind of doesn't really count in that game. So we know from a volume perspective, it's going to be there. Obviously a road underdog too, like you could be mercy of game script stuff, but I would imagine he catches a few more passes here because of the road, being a road underdog in this game. Yeah, it's like you said, just from a top-down perspective, when you look at the individual pieces in this game and then factor in both of these defenses and you try to find some objective data points like where some of these individual pieces could win, they all play a lot of players. It's really hard. Like not a lot stands out as like these are really extreme smash spots for this particular player.
Yeah, the ownership, just early ownership, obviously 2-game slate. It's not surprising that a lot of people are excited about game number 2 on this one. On the Ravens side of the ball, I mean, pretty easy to continue to talk about how good Kansas City has been against wide receiver ones. So I think that the Flower stuff is interesting. We'll see if we get Mark Andrews. I don't know if there's been news on that yet, but what do you see on the Ravens side of the ball? Obviously, Lamar just goes nuclear again last week, which was great. Had all the overs on Lamar, but this is a pretty big test.
Yeah, I mean Lamar's been hot too, especially for fantasy. I mean he's
Mhm.
outright led quarterbacks in fantasy, scoring 3 of his past 5 games. He's gone over 30 fantasy points 3 times over that span. He's gone over 20 fantasy points in 5 of his past 7 games. Again, this is another tough matchup overall, but there are some kind of avenues for I think Lamar Jackson to keep contributing from a fantasy stance. We're gonna need him to play better than he did last week in the first half because he struggled in the first half
Right.
against the Texans, only threw for 50 yards. They turned it on in the second half. Well, if they're going to rely on a game plan like that, the Chiefs have one of the best second half defenses in the NFL. They've allowed the lowest completion rate in the second half this season. They've only allowed 5.8 yards per pass attempt in the second half of games this season. That's third in the NFL. They've allowed only 8 touchdown passes in the second half this season. No passer has thrown multiple passing touchdowns in the second half against the Chiefs the entirety of this season. You got to be able to strike early on them if you're going to have some production. We've seen the Texans get really aggressive with Lamar. I mean, they played man coverage on over 50% of his dropbacks. They blitzed him on a season high 72% of his dropbacks. And Lamar's been good in those situations this year, as opposed to kind of previous iterations of Lamar Jackson. I mean, he's fifth in the league in yards per pass attempt against man coverage. He's fourth in the league against the blitz this season in terms of yards per pass attempt. And Kansas City's another defense that is very aggressive as well. They play man coverage on 31% of dropbacks. That's sixth in the league. They blitz at the 13th highest rate in the league. And in particular, in this matchup, Steve Spagnuolo has blitzed Lamar Jackson a lot. I mean, they blitzed him on over 40% of his dropbacks the past 2 times they played. And granted, these teams haven't played since 2021 either. So it's kind of a different thing to see what Spags does. But I mean,
Mhm.
Spags is aggressive and he likes the blitz. But Lamar did beat them up the last time that these teams played against the blitz. The Ravens also countered the Chiefs' aggressiveness by using a lot of Lamar Jackson in the individual run game. And we saw for 3 quarters of that game last week against the Chiefs, the Bills, the way they incorporated Josh Allen into just their top-down running game with the running backs, they were having success bleeding the Chiefs out. It ended up hurting them a little bit, but we know if you want to do that, like the Ravens are probably going to come in with a similar type of
Yep.
structure, right? Like they're going to be using Lamar in the run game as paired with Justice Hill, paired with Gus Edwards, because we've seen kind of the success teams have had. And it's not just Josh Allen. I mean, we've seen running quarterbacks in general have a lot of success against the Chiefs because they are an aggressive defense. They play a lot of man coverage, they blitz a lot, and that allows quarterbacks to have success rushing, right? Because you're not typically giving an extra defender to the quarterback because you're rushing the passer. But we've seen, guys like Easton Stick, Justin Fields at 47 yards, Jake Browning 30 yards and a rushing touchdown, Russell Wilson at over 30 rushing yards in both games against the Chiefs. Tua, Trevor Lawrence, Jalen Hurts all had over 25-yard rushing games
Let's
and no
go, Reeves.
touchdowns.
Keep pumping my bags. Lamar Jackson over 63 and a half rushing yards. Keep doing it. I love it.
Yeah, so I mean, there is that gives him kind of an out too. You always have the leg factor with Lamar Jackson. We need him as a passer to start higher, start hotter than they did last week. And then you
Yeah,
just kind of ask, like, though, when you look at the passing game for the Ravens, like, who wins in the passing game? You already kind of hinted on it. We took the Stephon. It hurt us to take Stephon Diggs
it
unders,
did.
man. It did,
But it
but
wasn't even a sweat, man. Like all you had to do was
not
watch that
even.
first quarter and be like, oh, he's not going to have a sniff.
No, I mean they just completely nuke wide receiver ones all year. Like we said, they allow the fewest yards per game to opposing wide receiver ones on the season. No wide receiver ones gone over 73 receiving yards in a game against them this season. You look at Zay Flowers; he's hit 70 yards in 6 games this season, right? And he's going over 75 yards just twice. Only 2 of those games have come in a game where Mark Andrews has played. So we'll see if Mark Andrews is up by the end of this week. I have a feeling he's at least going to be active this game.
Yeah.
This game, we'll see how if it's a full run out for Mark Andrews or not. We know Isaiah Likely's been contributing, so they have a guy that they can still rotate in. But then when you ask yourself, if Zay Flowers doesn't win, well, who's going to win here? Like, are we going to play Rashad Bateman? Are we going to play Nelson Aguilar?
Everyone
Odell
wants to
Beckham
play the
only.
running backs on this one,
Yeah,
so that's kind of the interesting one. But yeah,
I
passing
do
game.
think
Sorry. Yeah,
that I do think Odell Beckham is an intriguing play. And granted, he takes a step of faith. He only ran 8 pass routes last game. But
that had to have been
from a
really
matchup
surprising, right?
stance,
Didn't we think they were going to
mhm.
kind of unleash Odell a little bit here? Like we didn't see that at all.
Yeah, and they did go to like a lower value run. They were more run centric last week,
Hmm.
too. So maybe that played into it. But if they do have to throw, but I do think there's some signal here to at least on a 4-team slate, we
Right.
have to like we're gonna have to play somebody
Dude,
that's
his
up front
lines
here.
are like 20 yards, right? So like they're not expecting much from him either. So this is one of the ones I was considering, but still was too soft to pull the trigger on just yet. So
But we talked about the Chiefs' aggressiveness, and if you look at who the Ravens go to when teams do play a lot of man coverage, it has typically been Odell Beckham. I mean, he's been targeted on 27% of his routes against man coverage, 2.6 yards per route run against man coverage, as opposed to 19% target rate per route run against zone coverage, 1.7 yards per route run. He only has 18 fewer yards against man coverage this season than Zay Flowers, who's run like hundreds of more routes than him. So I do think that from a yardage perspective, at least a prop perspective, or maybe like a longest catch type of thing, like he's in play.
Yeah,
Even on this slate, I think he's in play. Because we're gonna have to play someone that we're uncomfortable with.
totally.
And if people want to get to like Juwan Jennings or I don't know, one of the Detroit Lions guys again. We're just gonna have to play one of these guys, and I think Odell probably stands out as me as one of these guys. Yes, he does, like I said, take a step of faith, but I do think that there's some signal there. Isaiah Likely's really been living on just this touchdown production.
Yeah.
So if Mark Andrews is back, it does compromise a little bit of that. He hasn't Isaiah Likely has had more than 3 catches in a game since week 15, but he keeps getting into the box and getting by for that. And then, like we said, you touched upon the running back just a little bit there. I think Justice Hill is the primary guy. Like I have no problem, like you said, you're chasing anytime touchdown for Gus
That's
Edwards.
totally different. I think in
Yeah.
DSFS, it seems like
Yep.
everyone wants to play Justice Hill. So yeah,
Yeah, but there's no problem with it. If they do still get inside the 5, it's probably going to be Gus Edwards. Gus
Mhm.
Edwards is out touched Justice Hill 20-4 inside the 5 this season. I think Justice Hill has shown the most juice of these guys, like the past
Sure.
3 games. He's looked the best. 77, 112, 57 total yards over his past 3 games. He's averaging almost 7 yards per touch over the past 3 games too as well. Dalvin Cook didn't have a touch before the fourth quarter last week either. So like I don't really stock him being like really involved.
Did you
And like I
see the
said,
stat line though, Reeves, the Dalvin Cook stuff? So my wife, I guess, saw a highlight of like a big run or something. He had like a 19-yard run. I was like, babe, you realize
longest run of the year.
yeah, he touched the ball 8 times for 23 yards. And his long was a 19-yard run, right? So he literally had like less than a yard per rush after that. I don't know, completely insane. It's just so funny how like all the Vikings people were just like fired up about that big run and literally 2 yards.
But we have seen the Chiefs be vulnerable to the run. That like
Yeah.
the one version, like there's 2 things this Chiefs defense doesn't do well for as good as they've been. They don't get a lot of turnovers, which I think is a testament to how good this defense is, right? Like we've seen a lot of defenses that like rely on turnovers, and then when they don't get turnovers, they're not good. Like the Chiefs don't get a lot of turnovers defensively, and they're still have been this good
I've
all
never
year.
thought about it that way. That makes a lot of sense though. Yeah.
I think it's a testament to really how good they are, but they are weak against the run, and they're able to script teams out of the run. So if they don't script the Ravens out of the run, are they able to have success? And then also the types of runs the Ravens kind of lean on are where the Chiefs are weakness. Baltimore running backs, 67% of their runs this season have come out of the shotgun because of Lamar Jackson. That's 5th highest in the league. Chiefs are allowing 4.9 yards per carry to running backs on shotgun runs, 26th in the league. They only have a 57% success rate against those runs. That's 28th in the league as well. So if the Ravens, that is, are able to get Lamar Jackson and this run game going in unison with quarterback runs and these running back runs, out of the shotgun, you get that RPO game going. The Chiefs could run into some struggles here, and if then they're going to have to be able to get the Ravens out of the run through game script, which obviously isn't implied, but it's Mahomes in the playoffs. But just from a DFS stance, though, very tough game to find a lot of individual pieces that you highlight and say, yeah, I just want to jam that guy in.
Right. Yeah, so let's get your picks, Reeves. I'll do mine first, just so that I walk into Baltimore with my head held high and no one tackles me. I am going to take the Ravens in this one, -3.5. I actually think the under is interesting as well. 2 really good defenses, 44.5. That's a number that still feels a little bit heavy to me. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, unfortunately for you I do also like the under. Obviously, you want to see this game shoot out
Yeah.
and go back and forth. I am more of a lean towards the under. And I am still backing the Ravens. It feels bad to go against Mahomes in the playoffs. He carried us kind of all, but like I think for the bulk of the season, the Ravens have been the best team in the NFL. And they've been good against basically all these good teams they play. I mean, they have 11 wins over teams that had a winning record this year. They have 7 wins against 2023 playoff teams. They've averaged beating playoff teams by almost 14 points per game. This Chiefs team has struggled to move the ball against good defenses all year. I still think that I'm just going to back what the whole story of the season has told us and back the Ravens.
All right. So before we move on to the next game, just a quick plug for the PropDrop newsletter. NBA has been absolutely on fire. We had another sweep the other day, so make sure you guys check that out. There's a link in the description for that. Obviously, all these props we've been talking about go out there first. And then from a PrizePicks perspective, the thing that we should probably touch on quickly, I guess, as we transition to the next game, Christian McCaffrey, if he gets 1 yard rushing in this game, you win. So make sure you guys take advantage of that free bet over there on PrizePicks, that free square Christian McCaffrey. If you use code HOLKA, you can get up to a $100 deposit match to play around with on the app. Link in the description for that as well. But let's transition to game number 2, Reeves. We have the Lions at 49ers. This is a 7-point spread in favor of the home San Francisco 49ers. Thoughts on this one? 51 for the total. So everyone's expecting this to be where the fireworks are at, I think.
Yeah, we've got two really good offenses. I mean, these teams score points and they're just really efficient offenses. I mean, the 49ers are second in the NFL in points per drive. The Lions are third. They also are teams that we like because they score touchdowns when they score. I mean, Detroit leads the NFL in rate of scoring plays that result in a touchdown. San Francisco second. 75% of all Detroit scoring plays are touchdowns. 74% of all 49er plays are touchdowns. 49ers lead the NFL in yards per play. Detroit is third. The one difference between the Lions and the 49ers and the Lions and the other teams in the playoffs, the two teams we talked about too, is defensively. If you look at just from a points per game perspective, right? Ravens are number 1, Chiefs are number 2, 49ers are number 3.
Yep.
Lions 23. You look at yards per play basis allowed. All the other 3 teams are top 7 in yards per play. The Lions are 28th.
Yep.
So like it's like the one thing that hangs out here is like this Lions defense. They've been very bend but don't break. Does it cost them in the playoffs? But like these are teams that they were favored in. They're projected to win. The Lions are only 2-4 when they allow 28 or more points this season. 49ers are second in the NFL in games this season where they scored 28 or more points. Obviously, people are going to go to the Debo stuff. I push back on the Debo stuff. I mean, granted, it's been because when you look at this season, the 49ers, when they haven't had Debo Samuel the 2 games, Brock Purdy still was excellent in those games. It was the turnovers that drug the 49ers down. So the Lions are going to have to get turnovers in this game. When Debo missed week 7 and week 8, Brock Purdy still completed 70%, 71% of his passes in this game. He had 9.1 yards per pass attempt and 11.8 yards per pass attempt in those games. He had 4 interceptions in those games. Now, the Lions, as bad as they have been getting turnovers. So, like, they're going to have to keep that up and force Purdy into some turnovers. Also, before those week 7 and week 8 games, the 49ers had won 4 games in a row without Debo Samuel. So, like, people are going to tell you about, like, the top-down stuff, like Debo, some games that the 49ers lost, like, when they weren't a good team early in Debo Samuel's career. But they were, prior to those 2 games where, like I said, Purdy had 2 interceptions in those 2 games, they had won 4 in a row without Debo Samuel. Also, when you look at Purdy's on-off splits without Debo Samuel, he would still be leading the NFL in yards per pass attempt and quarterback rating. With him. So, like, I am not stocking a lot of the on-off Debo stuff. Granted, yes, having a healthy Debo Samuel on the field makes the 49ers better.
Of course.
It is helpful.
Of course.
But the 49ers can have success in this matchup without Debo Samuel. Especially like we talked about some highlights of since week 7, the Lions have allowed a league high 8.8 yards per pass attempt. They're 30th in passing touchdowns allowed. They're 29th in touchdown rate allowed. They're allowing 18 passing points per game to opposing quarterbacks for fantasy football. That would have ranked 30th over the full season. Over their past 5 games, they've allowed over 300 passing yards and multiple passing touchdowns to every quarterback they have faced. No team in NFL history has allowed such a streak. They've allowed over 8.5 yards per pass attempt to all of those quarterbacks. The interesting thing when you look at this matchup is we've got 2 teams that throw over the middle of the field the most in the NFL. Brock Purdy's 3rd in the NFL in rate of throws, numbers to numbers. On those throws, the Lions have allowed a league high 9 yards per pass attempt. They're 31st in passing touchdowns in throws, but numbers to numbers. Also, the difference between kind of these 2 quarterbacks is when Purdy has had to throw the ball outside the numbers, he's still been good. He leads the NFL in rating on throws outside the numbers. He's 2nd in completion rate on throws outside the numbers, and he has led the NFL in yards per pass attempt on throws outside the numbers. And when you look at the Lions defensively, they also are 28th in yards per pass attempt on throws outside of the numbers, 24th in touchdown rate allowed on those throws. The Lions can get pressure. That's like where you have to try to get you have to get pressure on Purdy. Like if you don't pressure him, like you're drawing dead. We've talked about some of the silly numbers he has where he doesn't get pressured on the show. 76% completion rate, 10.1 yards for pass attempt when he hasn't been pressured, and 4.2 touchdown passes for every interception when he isn't pressured. You have to pressure Purdy. You have to get him to play from behind. That's like the Lions have to get takeaways in this game because if they don't get pressure on him, like they're just going to get decimated through the air.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, man. I just keep taking outside wide receivers against Detroit every single week. So in the wild card, we took Puka, we took Robinson, we took Mike Evans last week, we took Trey Palmer last week in the divisional, and I'm just pretty much all in on Brandon Ayuk already. 79.5 was the number that we got. That's already moved, I believe, to like 81, 82. Yep. So feel pretty good about that. But yeah, I didn't realize that they're still getting shredded in the slot as well. So their defense has done a pretty good job at defending running backs. That's really the only thing that we can kind of hang our hat on there, though. So I guess anything else on the 49ers side that really stands out. Kittle obviously gets there with kind of how he does it, these big plays, touchdowns, all of those things. So I'm not super worried about Purdy. Early in the week, at least, I'm just like, again, all in on the 49ers. And sometimes that's burned me just because they spread it out so much. But it does feel a little bit more lopsided to me, at least early on. So anything else on the 49ers stand out?
Yeah, I mean, we've always targeted George Kittle, and anytime one of these wide receivers either miss time or going to be limited.
Yep.
So, obviously he's going to be a huge standout in this game. George Kittle's run 159 pass routes this season with Deebo Samuel off the field. He's been targeted on 23% of those routes, 3.1 yards per route run. It's actually higher than Brandon Ayuk's yards per route run with Deebo Samuel off the field. He also has a team high 4 receiving touchdowns with Deebo Samuel off the field. You look at his splits with Deebo on the field, he's been targeting 18% of his routes, 1.81 yards per route run. Detroit also a favorable matchup against tight ends. We talked about their defense in the middle of the field. They're 24th in yards per target allowed to tight ends, 20th in touchdown rate. They've also had one of the softest tight end schedules of the league. They've only faced 2 tight end ones all season. One is Cole Kmet, who they faced twice, and it's Cole Kmet. Like, no one even really treats him as like a great juggernaut. And the other guy's Mark Andrews, who scored 2 touchdowns against them. So this is definitely a test for this Lions defense as well, from a schedule stance. I think a lot of people want to get to Juwan Jennings. I think it's fine if you want to chase it. He did have a season-high 9 targets in week 7 without Deebo Samuel, but then the next week, he wasn't even targeted on 33 routes against the Bengals without Deebo Samuel on the field. So very volatile option here. McCaffrey is interesting because it's a strength on strength matchup, right? Like that's probably the most intriguing part of this matchup is, the Lions, I've been saying for weeks, the Lions should try to be worse against the run. Let teams have some more rushing efficiency against you because they've been so good against running backs that it forces teams to just air it out against them and
attack their weakness, right?
You're inviting teams to attack your weakness. And we did see Rachaad White. They had a little bit of success. Rachaad White had 91 yards and a touchdown in that game, but no running back has rushed for more than 69 yards in a game against the Lions this season. Christian McCaffrey has rushed for 78 or more yards in 12 of his 17 games. We know he's a touchdown machine. The 49ers only faced 2 teams in the top 10 in yards per carry to running backs this season. One was the Vikings, and McCaffrey only rushed 15 times for 45 yards in that game, but he still had 51 yards receiving, and he had 2 touchdowns. I believe you were at that game and watched him score those touchdowns. So he's just such a touchdown machine. He's hard to get away from, especially on these small slates, in these condensed slates, because he just has so much touchdown equity and he catches the football so much, and he can just drag everyone else at the position. But yeah, I mean, it's an Ayuk game, it's a Kittle game, it's a 49ers, I think, passing game, which could include McCaffrey as well. Definitely all of those guys stand out.
I'm glad we don't have to think about the McCaffrey stuff a ton because we get that free square on PrizePicks, which was nice because I wasn't sure exactly what to do with that one. We just get absolutely burned last week by the Juwan Jennings unders. He goes in there and obviously plays a lot more when Deebo is out. I'm curious on Kittle, though, just to circle back really quickly. So the lines for him right now, 16.5 receiving yards, 4.5 receptions. And these ones that I keep taking that burn me, these receiving yards in first 2 receptions, I think I'm done with those. The 21.5 for that. The touchdown one is interesting, so that you might see that make it into one of my videos later in the week. But preference on yards versus receptions for Kittle?
Yeah, I like the yards more than the catches,
Yeah.
just because he's been more of a bigger play guy, and then
Yeah.
the Lions have been a big play defense.
Right.
No team allows more receptions of 20 or more yards per game than the Lions. We saw like guys like K. Dotton get loose. There was like a drive in that game where like K. Dotton caught like 4 straight passes for
Yep.
like 60 yards
What is
in
happening?
that
Yeah.
game.
All my
So
Mike
like
Evans stuff. Jesus. Yeah.
we still got there with some
We
Big
still
Mike
got there.
stuff. So we got
Yeah.
it. We had one final taste of 2023 Big Mike, and it was fruitful for us.
Yeah, was there any like easier play than Mike Evans last week though? Like I was scared about the Trey Palmer stuff, but the Mike Evans stuff was an absolute lock. But all
Yeah,
right,
and yeah, so I mean, yeah, 49ers passing game, play those guys.
play the guys. Okay, other
Play the
side
guys.
of the ball. Is there anything interesting here that we can attack this 49ers defense with? Anything that stands out to you?
There are a couple interesting spots, but a lot of people are going to talk about the Jared Goff home road splits, which I think are absolutely BS, by the way.
Yeah,
I think there's some truth to Jared Goff like playing in bad weather.
sure.
That's like historically followed him, and you look at like his hand size and stuff like that, and that's also true. We saw Brock Purdy going back to college, and the issues that Brock Purdy had playing in the rain last week. I think that's similar for Jared Goff. Like that's where you kind of get worried about Jared Goff in like road weather games,
Mhm.
like we had against the Bears like a few weeks ago. But when you look at from a top-down perspective, anyways, like Goff is 7th in the NFL in passing yards per game on the road, and he's 9th in yards per pass attempt on the road. Like, hasn't been a huge deal. Then when you say, all right, well, let's look at his road games outdoors, and his road games outdoors were at Kansas City, at Green Bay, at Tampa Bay, at Baltimore, at Chicago. Like, that's a
Sure.
shitty schedule for everybody
True.
on the road. And he torched the Buccaneers in the road like a good weather game. There's
Mhm.
obviously this game is, as we sit on Thursday morning, there are not supposed to be any weather implications. It's supposed
Yeah.
to look clean. We're supposed to be playing in Santa Clara, 60s, sun.
It's gonna be just fine.
No
Yeah.
wind, nothing.
Mhm.
It'll be fine. But the problem is, from a matchup perspective, the thing that matters for Jared Goff the most, and it
Pressure.
has mattered for his entire career, is disruption and can you pressure him?
Seems like a bad
Um,
spot for that.
and yes, especially when you have Jonah Jackson out for this game, Frank Ragnow's going to battle through, 2 injuries in this game. But in these playoffs, through 2 games at home in Detroit, Jared Goff's only been pressured on 33% of his dropbacks. It's the third lowest rate of any passer. It's the lowest rate of any passer that's played 2 playoff games.
Mhm.
When kept clean, 42 of 51 passing so far this postseason, 9.2 yards pass attempt, all 3 of his touchdowns when kept clean. When pressured, he's gone just 10 of 19, 4.9 yards per pass attempt without a touchdown. And for the season, when pressured, he's 6.3 yards per pass attempt, 6 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. 49ers 7th in pressure rate. They can get after the quarterback. So keeping Jared Goff upright is more of a concern than him playing on the road. Disruption is what matters for Jared Goff. And the 49ers, paired with some of these offensive line injuries, are capable of disrupting, Jared Goff. Also, when you look at one of the biggest mismatches, I think, of this game is we talked about Purdy, being third in the NFL in passes over the middle of the field between the numbers. Well, guess who's number one? Jared
Yeah.
Goff. For 57% of his passes have been numbers to numbers, highest rate in the league. And on those throws, he's been incredible. 9th in completion rate, 77.9% completion rate, 8.9 yards per pass attempt to 6th. Now, the difference here is the 49ers, number 1 in the NFL in pass defense over the middle of the field. They've allowed a league low 73.3 rating. They have 6 passing touchdowns over the middle of the field this season for the 49ers to 17 interceptions
Wow.
on throws
That's
in the middle of
wild.
the field. Yeah, and unlike Purdy, Goff, when he's been tasked to throw outside the numbers, has not nearly been as good.
Mm.
He is 22nd in the NFL in completion rate on throws outside the numbers. He's 19th in yards per pass attempt on throws outside the numbers. That is where you want to attack the 49ers. So we'll see if Goff can have some success there. But from a strength perspective, where Goff is the best, it's where the 49ers defense is the best at defending the middle of the field. Like the 49ers have had their soft moments, like when teams have been able to beat them up outside, as we've seen guys like Jamar Chase have like a big game against them, and the touchdown last week comes from like a slot fade to Bo Melton, but Romeo Doubs had the most receiving yards that they allowed, and on the outside in that game. That's kind of where they've been most vulnerable over the course of the season. Obviously, I think Amon-Ra is going to be Amon-Ra, though. Like, he's going to get his because so much target volume is going to come through him. I think Ben Johnson's he's shown consistency no matter who they play. Like, they face teams like the Ravens. They face, good defenses over the course of the season, and Amon-Ra still, he's got a touchdown or 100 yards in every game but 2 this season.
Yeah.
So I think he's going to be there and get his. It's the ancillary guys from Detroit that I think that just harder to like glom onto, right? Like Josh Reynolds hasn't gone over more than 80 yards in a game this season. He's kind of more than a touchdown or bust. If you are chasing a touchdown from Josh Reynolds, do know that like he has the same amount of end zone targets as Sam Laporta. They both have a team high 10 end zone targets. So they do incorporate him when they're making those play calls in the money zone, the green zone. Like Josh Reynolds is a part of those play calls. And Jameson Williams, a lot of people keep trying to chase the ghost on here. We talked about last week. We thought he was bad chalk.
Yeah.
He, 29% of his targets are on throws 20 yards or further downfield. It's the highest rate on the team. The next highest guy is 13%. But if you look at his game log, even games he's gotten there, his high is 13.3 PPR points in a game. Yep. Like, that's just not going to do it for you. And then on throws 20 yards or further downfield, the 49ers are fourth in the NFL in reception rate allowed to wide receivers. And then we talked about their middle of the field defense. Where they've been excellent is, guarding tight ends. And Fred Warner's been obviously a demon. You have to get the only 2 tight ends that have done anything against them are TJ Hawkinson and Trey McBride. And it's because those guys had so much overall value.
Right.
On a per target basis, they weren't that great in those games, but they got so much value. They had double-digit targets. So Sam Laporta is going to have to get double-digit targets or just get a touchdown in this game. So it's tough. I think when you look at where the Lions can have sneaky success, but it comes to attached to a road underdog, is with some of these running backs. So the 49ers have been kind of a good run defense overall, but they're really bad on the edges. And they've given up explosive runs on the edges. 4.6 yards per carry on 2 runs, off tackle and on the outside. And we saw Green Bay last week, their running backs had 10 carries for 99 yards on those runs. On interior runs, guard to guards, the 49ers have been excellent. And Green Bay running backs, 12 carries for just 25 yards on those runs. The interesting thing about this is, so the guy in the Lions backfield that's getting those runs is Jahmyr Gibbs, right? He's got 12 outside runs this postseason compared to 9 for David Montgomery. Since both these backs have been active, since week 10, it's Gibbs 66 to 50 to David Montgomery on those runs. And Gibbs has 6 touchdowns on those runs to just 1 for Montgomery. So the opportunity for those runs lie in Gibbs. It's interesting that Monty's been more efficient on those runs than Gibbs has, whereas counterintuitive, like Gibbs has been more efficient than Montgomery on interior runs. But the opportunity for the runs that have been successful against the 49ers, like those have gone to Jahmyr Gibbs. So that could be more of a signal for like Gibbs being a guy that could be kind of sneaky in this game. Then as a road underdog, you get the outlet to potentially have, dump offs and be used in the receiving game.
Yeah, that's interesting. His rush plus receiving 75.5, which is pretty high. It feels pretty high against the 49ers, but that's an interesting one.
And I've talked about this before on some of our betting shows, but Jahmyr Gibbs' longest rush over
love that
has hit 11 of the past 12 games.
Wow.
So like you can keep just jamming that in. It's at 14.5. He keeps regularly getting there. Obviously had the 31-yard touchdown run, which hit it last week.
Those longest run and longest catch or longest reception props, that's like my number one request, I think, for PrizePicks to add. I'd rather have that than some of these like combination yardage ones that they have. I think those are just really fun and a lot more fun than like the first 2 receptions or whatever. So there's a couple of props that I've taken in this game. You've made me feel worse about a couple of them, better about a couple of them. But Jameson Williams, 28.5. I took an over there. I did take an under on Jared Goff.
You could still just
could still get there. Yeah. I took an under on Goff, and then I did take an under on Amon-Ra, which is kind of scary just based on what he has done. But yeah, just such a really tough matchup, like you said, through the middle of the field. So it's kind of similar to Laporta. Like if he gets there, it's going to be on like 15 targets. It's not going to be on 10. So
I've got an under that's definitely an uncomfortable under, I think, for probably people to take, but I think objectively is super sound. And it's Christian McCaffrey under 19.5 rushing attempts.
That's a good one.
I don't know what it is on PrizePicks, but only one running back has had 20 or more rushes, or no running backs had 20 or more rushes against the Lions this season. We talked about their run defense. They should think about being worse. And even if you say, well, it's Christian McCaffrey, like Christian McCaffrey has only had 20 or more rushing attempts in one of his past 12 games.
Yep. 19.5 is the line. So I don't mind that.
Yep. So I think that one, it's a Christian McCaffrey under, which never feels great. But I think if you're going to take a Christian McCaffrey under, that's the one to take.
Okay. That's good. We got some Christian McCaffrey alpha here because you can only use this free square on PrizePicks once. So if you've already used that on one of your other entries,
and you don't care what he does with the runs, you just
exactly. That's true. That's true. Okay, cool. I'm in on that. Anything else on this game before we get into our picks and build a team here?
No, I think this is obviously the game I think people are going to try to build around. It's probably what we'll try to build around just for individual piece perspective, but we'll try to find something in that first game that we can that we touched upon that we can add here.
Cool. All right. So for this one, I would love to roll with the Lions. I do think we're going to have a Ravens 49ers Super Bowl, though. So I'm going to take the 49ers -7. I don't really have a lean on the total in this one. I think 51 seems about right. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I will say I like the 49ers. I don't mind taking the Lions with the full touchdown just
Okay.
because, listen, Dan Campbell has been the cover god.
True.
Like the other thing I like about Dan Campbell in this game from a betting perspective, and it's something I talked about when betting Dan Campbell, or talked about when people were taking the Rams as to upset the Lions in the wild card round, is Dan Campbell is versus Kyle Shanahan is not going to be conservative.
You
And
love
Dan
that.
Campbell is not a conservative head coach, so he's always going to be aggressive. And Kyle Shanahan almost cost the 49ers another playoff game last week.
That's
with
true.
The way he coached that final 2 minutes of that first half. So, like Dan Campbell getting 7 points, the Lions have been the best cover team under Dan Campbell, and they are 12-4, getting more than 6 points under Dan Campbell. So, I don't mind if you're going to take a Lions side, like even if they've only won 2 of those games outright, so it's not like they're pulling off all these upsides, but they've been cover gods. Again, like putting your money in Dan Campbell's hand has been usually pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, if you really need something at that point from a betting perspective, it's nice to know that he's at least going to go for it, right? That's just a
If
little
you're
bit more
getting
of
the
a
full
fun sweat.
7, I think it's fine to take the Lions maybe backdoor cover for you.
Okay, good to know. All right, well let's go ahead and build a lineup. 2-game slate, obviously, so not a ton of options here for leverage. But what direction do you want to go? Do we want to try and overstack this first game? That's going to be a little bit less popular. Or what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think we gotta Purdy this thing.
Yeah,
Just play
man.
all the guys.
Okay, Purdy's in
Purdy,
there.
Ayuk, Kittle.
Yeah, I'm gonna sprint to grab some Kittle stuff after this because that was the area I was feeling a little bit light as you were talking. So, all right, I like that. Cool.
And then, man, do we just add McCaffrey and try to get every 49ers touchdown?
We could. I'm not opposed to the onslaught for San Francisco. Like I said, I think it's an amazing spot.
All right, let's do that. And then let's
mhm.
add Jahmyr Gibbs as our bring back like we talked about.
Okay, I'm in on that. Got Gibbs in there. So if we just
I
throw,
feel like this slate, this in particular short slate is going to be more of a 3 running back slate than a 4 wide receiver slate. The wide receivers, not a lot of individual wide receivers stand out.
totally, yeah, we're gonna need some savings on this one. I think. I guess Ravens defense 3,200, Chiefs defense 2,900. That's probably the chalk. It's a 4-game or it's a 2-game slate, so there's only 4 options here. So I'm just going to throw in the cheaper one of those for now as our placeholder. So Chiefs D, defense not really going to probably make or break us on a 2-game slate anyway. 43.66 the rest of the way. So we're going to need at least one wide receiver piece that's a little bit on the cheaper side, I think.
Yeah, I want to play Odell for the reasons I
Nice.
said. Like, I think taking a shot. I think a lot of people are going to take Juwan Jennings, especially if Debo like ends up not practicing or is just outright ruled out at that same price point. But yeah, I think Odell is the guy.
I like it. Okay.
Remember a couple years ago, we had one of our biggest weekends on this slate where we were on Gabe Davis for the infamous
The Gabe Davis game. Yeah.
We faded Stephon Diggs going into that game. And
Yeah.
that was the infamous we won a bunch of bucks. So hopefully Odell. I don't know if Odell's got 4 touchdowns in him, but
There you go. Now you got the clip
maybe
though if
he'll
it
be-
happens. So you hear it. I can probably move that around to where you're saying that he's going to score 4 touchdowns. That's perfect. Okay.
Yeah, can you
Perfect.
just chat GPT it or something?
Something. There's got to be a way. We have the technology. Running back. This running back slate is kind of interesting. Like we could just put McCaffrey in there. I have him in the flex right now. So maybe I'll move McCaffrey into that
Let's get
running
one of
back
these
slot.
Baltimore. Let's get one of these Baltimore guys. I don't know
Okay.
if we have enough for Gus. So do we do Justice Hill?
We could do Justice Hill. I think I'm fine with that. 4,800 for him.
And what is that?
That leaves us with 3,900 for a wide receiver. So JMO, one of these KC guys, essentially.
Yeah, one of these KC guys is rough.
Mm-hmm.
Last weekend was MVS. The ghost of MVS made a couple big catches, but like, are we going to run that back?
We're 100 away from getting Josh Reynolds. Yeah. Aguilar, if we want that, just try and grab a touchdown. There's a few things here.
Yeah, I mean, do we just throw Josh Reynolds in there and just punt Lions D?
Okay.
Just try to get like a Purdy interception or something, whatever.
I'm
And just
always
end that
team
loss.
play the cheapest defense on these slates. I don't think it's that
Yeah, let's
big a
just do
deal.
that. Because I mean, listen, I would love to tell you I have a objective take for you to play like a Chiefs punt wide receiver, but I
Yeah.
don't.
Okay.
There are some smart men in the world, like who
I could
I
appreciate the honesty there because anyone that wouldn't be honest about that and just say that they have a lean on that wide receiver core right now, I think they're probably full of shit. So perfect. I
I
love it,
don't know, man.
Reeves.
I don't know.
We have probably at least one more segment with us for the Super Bowl. Probably jam together some sort of compilation for that, which will be fun. No live stream this week since I'm going to be traveling to Baltimore for the AFC Championship game. But this has been fun, man. Let the people know where they can find the worksheet. I imagine at least one of those is going to be free this week, right?
They're both free this week. So if
Nice.
you want to read even more in detail about this game or something I didn't touch upon, go over to Sharp Football Analysis. Both games are just open for anyone to read.